my channel. Well, this is kind of like a rambly subject type of one, but it's the title of it's going to be "We Learn from Mistakes, Not from Success." I mean, you can learn a little bit from success, but usually the way you learn something is through failure. As an example, I failed to close that knife blade properly. We had hand violation there again. And because of that, I suffered. Now, was it the knife's fault? It was actually my fault. But you might blame the knife. And that's where a lot of this is leading also, because when I was starting to collect traditional patterns, I extensively went into Rough Riders. I'm still getting Rough Rider knives because it allowed me to get an inexpensive knife and learn about it, whether I like that particular pattern or that particular style, and along the way you find knife patterns that may or may not be practical, but you like sunfish or something. A lot of people say, "Oh, those are too heavy," and they're cool because they're kind of like old school, giant. They're like the Medford, of their days. The overbuilt, big, sturdy. You can beat on them. Designed to be hit. With something on the back here to sever rope if it has to. Just a heavy-duty type of knife. Along the way of getting different knife patterns of Rough Riders, I wanted to try a Congress. And at the time, I didn't realize they have different sizes of Congress. I thought they were all just like, a little tiny pocket knife. And I believe it was a tobacco bone. I should have dug that one out, but I'm not organized with my knife storage right now. They're all over the place and in boxes and stuff. But what had happened was, a Congress has like 4 blades, opposing blades, and every one of them except for the main blade, when you went like this, you looked, and right where the pin was at, there'd be a chunk, pin wrap. And it was like, oh my God. I don't like Congress knives. And it's not that I didn't like Congress knives. It's because I had gotten one bad Rough Rider, and it happened to be in a pattern that I was just trying out. I wasn't sure I liked it or not. And that influenced me to where I was like, man, I don't like this particular pattern. And it wasn't the pattern's fault. It was the particular knife. Now, also that brings another thing to mind, is another saying, is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Now, think of how many knives are turned out, the ratio of bad knives to good knives. Well, in your case, if you order a knife and it's the first one, let's say I've said this before, let's say it's your first Rough Rider that you get, or your first case knife. You paid extra money for it and everything, and you get it and you think, all right, and then, you're looking at it critically or something, and you say, whatever is your pet peeve, there's a gap here, or they didn't do this right, or they didn't do that right. That's probably going to influence you. It could influence you to say all case knives are bad, or even let's say you even had one that was defective. It's going to influence you, on. And the thing is, as far as like learning from mistakes, it's just like this particular knife. This is not a Rough Rider; it's a Marbles, but well, it's an Imperial. It's a Charade. I thought it was a Marbles. I forgot. The covers fell off. One of the covers fell off, and that's when I found out that it was a fake pin cover. Well, then I thought, well, I'm going to get some abalone, some real abalone, and take an inexpensive knife and try to bling it up, make it look a little bit better. Well, yeah, I learned from mistakes. I made, mistakes on this one, and still this one is not perfect. I mean, I like the way it came out, but it's not perfect, to me. And I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have learned this if it wouldn't have been for a mistake that somebody made, like not using enough glue on their particular, charade knife, at the glue factory. They made a mistake. That's also like, if the reason why you don't learn anything unless you make a mistake is because if you're doing something correctly, you've already learned. You're not learning, you're just repeating. You've already learned, And a lot of the great discoveries were from mistakes. Mixing some chemicals, inadvertently getting it mixed up and discovering a new chemical, that does something entirely different. A lot of times when they're doing research for a particular thing, they might find a side effect or, a reaction they weren't even looking for, but turns out to be great. So all I'm saying is, as far as like mistakes go, especially like if you're judging a company by a mistake, just think of how many. If you've ever done this, let's say you were going to try to make this flashlight, and you think, oh, that's easy, You've got to get the machining just right. The circuit board in there has got to be done. A lot of this is done by computers, at pick and place. They're going through a microscope. But, I mean, if somebody wires up the power switch wrong or whatever, and they don't test it out, that's another thing about quality and quality control. Every factory, every situation where I've seen they've done large manufacturing, quality control is just a sample. It requires, usually a process that if people follow it properly, the product will come out great every time. And just to ensure that, usually, they'll take a percentage of the batch and they'll go in and look at it. Let's take a random one, like, all right, let's look at this one under a microscope or whatever and see if it meets all our parameters. And if they find a problem, then they might start going back to wherever they think the problem was coming from and try to correct the problem and fix it. But if there's no problem, then none of that, the sampling just goes on and people just, do their job. And I'm not saying that they have to, if you have to have a mistake or whatever, but if you get a knife from a particular company, you're just trying it out, Case, Rough Rider, Benchmade, whatever, and your first example of it is bad, what I usually do is I see, again, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. All those other good knives that were out there hardly ever get any notice. If you think about it, you've got a wagon, and it's got 4 wheels, and one wheel is squeaking. Why? Because it needs grease. It's getting low, so it needs grease. It gets the attention. The other ones might not. Why? Because they're doing their job. They're working. They're fine. So why spend your time on something that's perfectly fine? Fix the bad thing. And so that's why videos about bad knives, Red Riders are a piece of junk, or Case knives suck, blah, 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 blah. It's because that one person, that one instance, you don't hear about all the good ones, A lot of times people will sit there. To me, when you get a knife, it's a personal thing as to what is good for you. I mean, if you've been watching your favorite knife channel and they say that the most important thing on a knife is the fit and finish on the back, don't worry about anything else, but this is the most important thing. And then you get one with a little bit of gap, and that's it's not affecting the function of the knife. It's not affecting anything about it, but in your mind, well, your favorite channel says that it's bad. All I could say on that is it's trying to like please everyone. Everybody's going to have a different thing. Some are going to say, well, I don't like a match strike nail neck, or I don't like a Warncliffe or whatever. That's why there's so many different knives and so many different shapes and so many different knife channels, because it's an individual thing. And what you like and what you want and everything, that's you. That's entirely up to you. But it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone else. You know, I mean, like some people might think that you have to progress. You can never go beyond. You have to go beyond budget. Budget is like, well, okay, you're on your training wheels. You're learning how to ride a bike, but you're not really riding a bike because you really haven't gotten into the big boy knives. You don't have to get into the big boy knives to like knives. Uh, that's just a different area, and it requires different resources. You know, expensive knives. That's what I like about inexpensive knives is because you can look through and decide what you want on an inexpensive knife. And if you want to get a collection, you can get an inexpensive collection. It can fill that urge, of collecting something. And if you want to experiment on a budget knife, you can experiment. And you're not worried about, these are perfect to learn sharpening on too, because usually the steel is not that sharp. So you're going to get plenty, this sucker's sharp. You're going to get plenty of opportunities to sharpen a knife. I mean, so there's a lot to be said about budget knives. And a lot of times when you go out, what are you going to carry? A $600 knife or $800 knife or $1,000 knife in your pocket? Maybe to show off. Or maybe because you realize you spent so much money on that knife, you better get some use out of it. So a lot of times those are just for investments, though. Just like when this, supply and demand. Like when this flashlight came out, they already had a brass version, and they had plenty of those in stock. But they did a low initial production run of this one. They were testing out the RGB lights, and they were testing out a bunch of different stuff. And they made a very low quantity of them. It looked like 111. This is not the real pocket light. I stole this off of an old light. But they only made 111 of them. Well, if you knew how many that they made, see, at the time you don't know. When you're buying them and they're available, you don't know how many they've made. 111 is pretty small for a production run of, anything. That's like a pilot run. And those things are always collectible. So if you wanted to invest, some idiot, now this is a narrow time frame window, but some idiot put one of these up on there, still sealed in a bag. He's selling it for $150 on eBay, plus shipping. $150. This light only costs like 30-something at most. I got it from, their website. It wasn't on AliExpress or anything. It was on the Workcoast website. So as far as investing goes, if you know something's going to be rare, or it's a first run or whatever, then it can become like an investment thing. I mean, the knife, getting into knives, there's no, I'm only going to collect, or I'm only going to do this, or it's whatever you want to do, and whatever your resources are available. And there is no standard, like, all right, here's the progression of knife collecting. First, you got to do this, and then you got to start with this, and then no, it can be anything. You could start off with modern knives and switch back to traditionals, or you could start off with traditionals like I did, and then go to modern knives, and then go back to traditional knives. So is that the proper way to do it? No, that's the way I did it. I mean, that's a way of doing it. Sorry, this thing changes color when I touch it, and changes intensity. Just like this one is kind of rare in its original form. It's the buckshot bone Rough Rider. This is when I was experimenting with glow-in-the-dark stuff, And even Rough Riders, you can double or triple the amount of it if you figure it out right, as far as like investment. Because I think these were like maybe $15 when they're first available. Now, when you can find them, you're lucky to find them for like $25 or $30, if you can find them. So I don't know where I was going with that as far as like a mistake, because that wasn't a mistake. But maybe if you're investing in, if you're trying to buy knives for investment, it might have been a mistake to buy something that's more expensive, but a lot of them were made, I mean, knife investing is entirely different from knife collecting. There's a whole different philosophy to it. You're not, as much as you like knives and everything, if you're going to invest in a knife, you don't use it. I mean, you store it with the paper. If it came with a wrap, everything is as pristine as you can get it to get the highest value for it. I've never done that, really, bought knives for investments. It's always been because I like the looks of them, or I wanted to use them, or they're going to add to a collection or something. And I started getting that way with flashlights too, because it was like, I already had one of these. I didn't have one of them in copper. I didn't have any flashlight in copper, so that was like, ooh, rarity. I want to try something copper. I knew it was going to be heavy from copper scaled knives and brass knives. I knew it usually doubles the weight, but this is a small knife. A small light. And I didn't get it for investment. I got it for messing around. And it opened up a new area for me. And what I learned also is that if I would have wanted to keep this one as an investment, I should have never taken it out of that wrapper. But then I wouldn't get to experience the flashlight. So I should have bought two or whatever. Well, no, I don't want to be that person, because they're going to come out with a full production run. Maybe they're going to change, the display lights. Maybe they're going to keep them the same. But it's going to be available again. And it's not going to be $150, even on Amazon. I mean, if they ever get to Amazon, it wouldn't be that much. So this is just kind of like, in the flashlight world, it's the same within a knife world. There are people that a GC just came out. They're going to make one really quick, and it's limited and everything. So instead of just buying one for themselves and being happy, they'll buy 2 or 4, however many they can afford, or however many allowed, and then turn around and double them. And there are people that'll pay that, because they're no longer available, and they're a GEC collector, and the only way to get it is a secondary market. And everybody, it's like they all know, don't lowball each other. Everybody sticks with a double price. So if you see one listing, you see a dozen of them where it's at least double the price of if you would have gotten it on time. And to me, I don't want to be that type of person, Yeah, you could basically get a knife for free, a GEC for free that way. Buy 2, charge double for the other one, put it on eBay. It makes perfect financial sense, but there's like an ethics to it too, Think about, well, I guess you could look at it as like, screw them, they're GEC collectors. They want to pay more, let them. And they might as well pay me more, I mean, it all depends on what you're doing and your ethics and everything. I don't like to do that. I like to give away knives if possible, just because to give joy to someone and everything. But I'm not going to give away all my knives just because it would make people happy. So I don't know. As far as like squeaky wheel gets the grease, that's why you hear about defects on particular knives or people's complaints, is because it's just like bad headlines always get the most attention and views and everything. There's one particular guy on YouTube that makes, it's not a knife channel, that makes clickbait titles that if you look at them, the way you would think it, like somebody is found dead in their office, you would think that the story is going to talk about, but no, it's like dead politically or something. Like, come on. I don't know where I'm going with that one, but that's just designed to get attention. And so if you put up a video and saying, charade sucks, their scales fell off, they're a piece of crap, blah, 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 it's going to get a lot of attention. Is it going to solve anything? Is it going to fix anything? No, why don't you just show people how to take lemons and make lemonade out of it? Turn something bad into something good. Learn a new skill. I never messed with abalone with plastic, you know, covers on it and everything. So I started experimenting with, maybe flame will work. Yeah, you don't want to get flame back here. It does bad things. And then you find out also that even if this comes off, the initial cover back there, you don't really notice it, but there's a bunch of scratches on it. And so how do you polish abalone? You can get into a lot of different things. You learn something. Basically, you're learning from that mistake. And so that's all I'm saying on this stuff, you know. Sometimes, like, if you get a knife with blade wrap and it was inexpensive, rather than sending it back, start examining what caused it, you know. Was it this raised portion down here on the mainspring? Or was it the kick was ground too much? Or a combination of both? And if you start looking into that, examining that, and figuring out ways to fix it, you'll find things that work and things that don't work. And after a while, you'll find out the best way to approach it. So if you get another knife that's got blade wrap, let's say it was a limited edition or something like that, there's very few of them made, you don't want to send it back, but you might want to be able to try to fix it yourself. So you go down in here, in most cases, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do without scratching the liners on the method that I use, but you get down there with a file that only has I took a popsicle stick and ground it down, open up both blades, get down there, and I just start going back and forth with sandpaper on the mainspring, because you're not going to go so far that you break the thing. It's usually just a little bit, and I'd rather take it off the spring area down here than off the blade itself. Yeah, if you got down to where, you know, you ground out where you're seeing the pin, well, then all you've got is the back side of the pin really supporting the mainspring. You've introduced a weak spot in the knife that eventually, this thing flex. It pivots off that pin right there. You weaken it too much, it could break. But if you've got a knife that's got blade wrap, and you're just going to try to sharpen it out, you're going to lose a lot of useful blade edge that you could have been using, cutting, whatever. You're better off trying to build up the kick right here. And then you start learning about why the kick is important, because it's the tip. You can't go too high or you're going to start poking yourself. So that's why I said, for my fix on them, I just figured out a way of just trying to get down there and taking off as much as I can. Yes, I experimented with a Dremel tool once. It was a failure. There were scratches everywhere. I tried a bunch of different things, but usually like popsicle stick and sandpaper, super glue it on there. It's got to be customized to fit your situation. But anyway, that's just my rambling about bad knives. Sometimes bad knives are a good thing because you learn something from it. And it wasn't necessarily the knife was bad. It was just that it didn't arrive as advertised. So, yeah, you could call it defective. But like I said, people learn from their mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you're not learning. So anyways, there you go. I probably made a lot of mistakes in this video. Hopefully I'll learn from it. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.